as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the subcommittee chairman for Africa. Explain this process to us. You introduced the legislation in the Senate. What has to happen next? Does it need a hearing? Does it need an action from your Foreign Relations Committee? Does it need a Senate vote and a House vote as well? And if Congress passes it, what happens inside the State Department? How quickly can the Secretary of State review the evidence and make a finding and begin this process?
Well, there are two paths. One is the congressional and legislative path, and I've introduced this legislation to go down that path. In order to pass the United States Senate, the Senate operates under what are called the filibuster rules, which means you need at least 60 votes to pass the Senate. We only have 53 Republicans. That means you need a minimum of 7 Democrats, maybe more, in order to pass something through the Senate. At this point, we do not have any Democrats supporting this legislation. I've introduced it fairly recently. I've spoken with a number of Democrats. I'm trying to work to build broader support. There have been Democrats who have been critical of the Polisario Front, but none have yet joined that legislation. To build that coalition will take time. That is not imminent. That is not going to happen tomorrow. But I do think, particularly if the Polisario Front continues to engage in bad conduct, to engage in acts of terrorism, I think you will see support and bipartisan support grow. The second path is the administration can do so. The president can do so. The Treasury and state can do so. And at the end of the day, that's the most likely path, is to convince the administration to go down the road of designating the Polisario Front. I've introduced this legislation in part to build momentum for doing so, and that I have chaired multiple hearings where I've discussed the Polisario Front and the threat that they pose, not just to Morocco, but also to the United States. And so that's the second path. If the administration decides to designate the Polisario Front as a terrorist organization, they can move quite swiftly. And so it's simply a matter of building the public case for doing so. And that's something. I'm the chairman of the Africa Subcommittee of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So I've chaired a number of hearings focused on Africa, but in particular threats to the United States that are brewing in Africa. And Africa is very much the continent of the future. You look at the young workforce, you look at the enormous resources that are there. And Africa is also the theater for an enormous proxy battle between the United States and China on the one hand, but in this instance, between the United States and Iran. And I think it is in America's interest to be aware of what our enemies are doing and to be in a position to confront them effectively to defend U.S. national security interests.